and welcome to Tucker Carlson. Tonight, when you think of American states that have fallen right off the ledge into the deep end of vacuous lifestyle liberalism, and we do think of that from time to time, you probably think of Vermont. Vermont's a place that banned fracking despite the fact it has not a single oil or gas well in the state. Or maybe you think of Massachusetts, where virtually all human pleasure has been banned for decades, if not centuries. And of course, you think of California. California, a place where one city is now paying people to be transgender. All of these are famously liberal places, so you're not surprised. But Utah is not a liberal place. When you think of Utah, you imagine big, happy families, an even bigger salty lake, and a couple of very good ski mountains. You think conservatism because Utah is conservative. It always has been. It still is. Utah has the highest rate of church attendance in the country. It has one of the lowest crime rates. The birth rate of Utah families is fully 25% higher than the national average. In the last presidential election, Donald Trump took nearly 60% of the vote in Utah. So Utah is definitely not California. And yet, some of its most prominent politicians would very much like to change that. If you don't believe it, watch them talk sometime. They sound like they're running for city council in Santa Monica. That doesn't make sense. Talk about a misalignment. A highly conservative state with extremely liberal leaders. How did that happen? Actually, it's not as unusual as you'd hope it would be. Across the country, some of the most liberal Republicans represent some of the reddest states. Why? Well, maybe it's the result of corporate influence and corrupt party leadership. That's true. Maybe voters in those states don't feel threatened, so they're not paying close attention to who they vote for. Whatever it is, it's very obvious. By contrast, the most energetically conservative governor in the country is not from Alabama. He's from Florida, which to this day is split almost evenly along party lines. So Ron DeSantis has to earn every vote, and he does that by representing his constituents. It tells you a lot. Meanwhile, bright red Utah is now led by a cut-rate Gavin Newsom imitator called Spencer Cox. Spencer Cox is a former telecom executive who always seems like he's auditioning for the title of America's guiltiest white guy. He's beyond belief. Watch this virtual town hall with high school students last year, in which Spencer Cox announces his preferred pronouns to a young girl in the audience.
Well, thank you so much, Gabby, for that question. My preferred pronouns are he, him, and his. So thank you for sharing yours with me.
Ooh, what a creepy guy. My preferred pronouns are he, him, his, Cox tells a room full of children. So we've got that cleared up. Spencer Cox identifies as a male, at least to some limited extent. Now, Fox could have cleared up that mystery a lot more quickly simply by declaring, I'm a man. Instead, he went full hostage video. My preferred pronouns are he, him, his. Just in case you had any doubt that neoliberal interest groups control Spencer Cox's brain. Now you know for certain. Because it's never about gender. It's always about obedience. Spencer Cox is obedient, if nothing else, but not obedient to his voters. That's the weird thing. What exactly is the market for superfluous pronouns in Utah? Pretty limited, you would think. Most people in Utah don't need to be told. Yet somehow Spencer Cox is their governor. In a piece today, a really good piece, Nate Hochman of National Review reports that the very first document Cox signed as governor of Utah was something called the Utah Compact on Racial Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion. And it's everything you'd imagine and more. The document describes racism as, quote, more than just an individual character flaw. No, racism instead is a system that you participate in, Mr. and Mrs. Racist, a system that can only be stopped with, quote, bold anti-racist actions and policies right now. Ooh, you know you're in trouble, Mr. and Mrs. Utah voter. What are these policies? We'll let Spencer Cox explain. Here is Spencer Cox wearing his little obedience mask during a Zoom interview, explaining that he supports excluding white students from an academic scholarship program purely because of their skin color, because that's anti-racism. No, it's not racism. It's anti-racism.
The Utah Jazz is excluding white children from consideration for their scholarship program. Do you think this is racist? And what will you do to prevent the Utah Jazz from acting in this racist manner?
Well, I don't think it's racist. In fact, I think it's in response to, unfortunately, some very difficult and racist injustices that have happened in our community for a long time.
So here's this moist little guy sitting alone in his gilded room with a mask on telling us it's not racist to exclude people from a scholarship based on their race. Does anyone else in Utah believe this? We'd like to meet them. There can't be many of them. Most people in Utah have more sense than that. Racism is when you hurt people based on their skin color, right? Right. And most people in Utah, by the way, still believe in biology, also gravity and photosynthesis. The state of Utah is pro-science. And we know this because Utah state legislature just passed a bill banning men from competing in women's sports because men, it turns out, are not women. But Spencer Cox disagrees. He vetoed that bill. Fortunately, 2/3 of the legislature overrode Spencer Cox's veto and finally got the bill passed. This has been going on for a long time in the state of Utah. Spencer Cox previously threatened to veto a proposed ban on gender transition surgeries for minors, which, once again, most people in Utah say they don't want. So here you have a perfectly normal state filled with perfectly happy, normal people, somehow run by a low IQ weekend MSNBC anchor.